wide receiver, linebacker, offensive tackle, and of course, quarterback. Having elite players in any of these positions can greatly increase a team's chances of winning football games and ultimately raising the Lombardi Trophy. However, not all positions are created equally, and in a league with limited money that can be allocated towards players, NFL GMs might have to choose between getting an elite wide receiver 1 or getting a stud defensive tackle. But how should GMs evaluate which positions are more valuable than others? Today, I'm going to try to answer this question using a little bit of data science. The first position we'll examine is the one that has always appeared to be the most important, quarterback. To figure out how important quarterbacks are for winning, we need two main metrics. Firstly, we need to measure how successful a team's season was. The easiest way to do this is to use the draft order of the following year. The NFL draft order ranks every team from 1 to 32, with 32 being the Super Bowl champions and the team number 1 being the worst team of the season. This data will of course ignore any draft trades and just be the original order so that it properly represents how well each team did. Next, we need a way to measure how well each team's quarterback played during the season. The metric I will use for this is PFF grade. PFF is an organization that uses many different variables to assign each player a grade for how well they play. These grades differ from many other stats because they account for what could have happened and not just what did happen. For example, if a quarterback throws a pass that should have been intercepted but was just dropped by the DB, the player will get a lower PFF grade for that play. Using these grades, I ranked each team's quarterback from 1 to 32, with 32 being the best and 1 being the worst so that it follows the same format as the draft order. Now that we have these two metrics, we can plot out data on a graph with draft order on the y-axis and player ranking on the x-axis. Last season, Patrick Mahomes was ranked the second best quarterback and his team won the Super Bowl, so there would be one data point up here. Bryce Young was the third worst ranked quarterback last season and the Panthers were the worst team in the league, so he'd be right here. I gathered data for all 32 teams for the past 10 seasons and plotting all the data looks like this. While it may look random at first, there is a solid correlation here. The way we will measure this correlation is by using linear regression, which is a machine learning technique in which we find the straight line that best fits this data. For this data, the linear regression line looks like this. The way we can compare this line to other football positions will be by comparing the slopes of the lines. If the data were 100% correlated, the line would have a slope of 1, while if there were no correlation, the slope would be close to 0. This line has a slope of 0.64, so as we expected, having good quarterbacks strongly correlates with winning more games. Before we get to the other positions, there are some issues with this analysis. Firstly, player injuries were difficult to deal with. I added a minimum snap requirement for players to be eligible, which helps, but it still isn't perfect, because a player who played, say, 10 games in a season versus a player who played all 17 games would be treated equally, even though they obviously do not have equal impact on how many games their team wins. However, there's a lot of data, so I'm hoping it shouldn't have too big of an effect. Secondly, the way I measured positions, it takes only the best player into account. It would probably be more thorough to measure the position group as a whole, but this would be much harder to do, so we'll just frame this analysis as how much star players affect winning. Finally, linear regression is not a perfect tool by any means, and all in all, none of what I did is perfect, but it should be good enough to get some insights. So with that out of the way, let's see the results of the other positions. To everyone's shock, the position with the least correlation to winning is punter, with essentially 0 correlation. Next up, we have the first positions with actual correlation, with linebacker and defensive tackle both having slopes around 0.18. Following those, we get a pair of offensive line positions with offensive guard and center both having slightly higher slopes. Special teams also get some love, with kicker having the next highest. Running back and tight end are the next highest slopes, with a considerable jump over the past few positions. Running back being this high was particularly surprising to me, with so many GMs being hesitant to give substantial money to running backs nowadays. The next highest slopes are a pair of defensive positions, with safety and edge both having slopes of around 0.29. After that, we see offensive tackle appears to be significantly more important than the other two offensive line positions, with it being the fourth most important position overall. The second and third most important positions are two positions that face off against each other in cornerback and wide receiver. And finally, as expected, quarterback is by far the most important position for winning games. One thing I also wanted to see was how this ranking compared to how positions are currently being paid. To do this, I found the highest paid player in each position and ordered them. I then compared this ordering to the ordering we found using linear regression. We can then plot each position by how off my ordering was to the pay ordering. Doing this, we see that defensive tackle had by far the biggest discrepancy, with their salary ranking being 9 places off of my ordering of how much they affect winning. On the other end, tight ends and kickers were both higher in my ranking than how they are currently being paid. Obviously, the takeaway from this video should be that if you want to win in the NFL, take all the money you would pay a stud defensive tackle and give it to a kicker instead. Joking aside, thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing. Until next time, peace.